fine for now. So let's go around the room first before we get started and do introductions. I'm sorry that we're getting started a little late here. So I'm David Naadel. I'm the person who sends out all the emails to everyone all the time. My company is Blue Feather. We do business process technology consulting. So help businesses improve their processes to make them more efficient and effective using technology solutions. So we will go to the left here.
That was a good little speech. I'm Patricia Schiffman, Little Green Apples, which I've used your product, Nicholas, for a while.
Yes, I recognize that name.
I thought you might. And I have Little Green Apples, which does FileMaker development.
Mine is Ron Stark. I'm retired and just started my business up after retirement and have one primary client that gives me what I need to keep me busy enough. Company is Foothills Technical Services. I have a client, and the client is down in Charleston, and do most of my work remotely.
My name is Erica Kidd. I'm working with David at Blue Feather.
FileMaker newbie, just beginning the voyage.
And that's it. That's us on our side.
Excellent. Well, the little background from me, obviously name is Nicholas Orr from Goya, company in Melbourne, Australia. We've been doing FileMaker. I actually was cleaning up my desk and found my business registration certificate just yesterday. So we've been doing FileMaker for 21 years now. And about 10, 11, 12 years ago, we started building, or I started building a DDR analysis tool. This was around the time of FileMaker 6. So for those who have been around that long, there was a really cool little FileMaker tool that analyzed solutions by directly querying the file itself, called Metadata Magic, which I loved. But there was also this HTML and XML DDR database design report, which a couple of other tools had used. And just on a whim, you know, when you're bored, I started playing with the XML one and with XSLT and started putting together something. And, you know, it was just more of a personal interest thing myself. Eventually, I got to a point where I realized it was not only pretty cool, but that my favorite little tool, Metadata Magic, hadn't survived the transition to version 7. So at that point, I decided to turn it into something useful and turn it into a product. So the idea of the product, BaseElements, for those who haven't used it or don't know it well, is that it queries your whole solution from the inside out. So I liken it to being able to go into if you're an electrician, to be able to go into a building and, you know, like a multi-story, you know, office building, and be able to map out all the wiring inside the building without pulling the building down. So you could figure out which wire goes where, through which wall, which power point is plugged in, which one's active, which one's broken, and you can find issues. So what it's based on is this database design report, which you get out of FileMaker Pro Advanced. So you select the files you want to generate, and you can specify a report either in HTML or XML. Obviously, XML is not just easily readable. It looks like a bunch of gibberish. So the HTML report is a little bit useful, but it has some real flaws. So, for example, let's have a look here. There's a HTML report that has been generated. So if we open this up, it tells us some interesting things about the solution. So we have 2 files in this solution, test file 1, test file 2. I can go into test file 2, and this is just a single massive, big, long HTML file that documents everything. So I can see exactly what's in it, in theory. I can see which triggers are used, you know, accounts, all that sort of information. It has some real drawbacks, though. So, for example, if I say go to table occurrences, I have a table occurrence here called test file 2 DDR. Obviously, in my setups here, I'm not being very creative. And that this comes from a different file, comes from data source test file 2. And so you go, oh, cool, no worries, that's the information I need. When I click on that to have a look, so if you're not aware, I've actually jumped into test file 2. I can look at this table and I can see which table occurrences this particular table uses. So where am I here? Table occurrences here. So this bit of information here. And you can see that it doesn't actually point back to test file 1. So even though there's a link from 1 to say this table occurrence exists in 2, if I was to look at this table occurrence and say, where's it used? I'd think, oh, it's only used once in the current file and nowhere else. So it has a sort of one-way cross-file relationship. But obviously as well, on top of that, this is just HTML. So if I want to search for anything, file 2, for example, I've got 18 matches, and they're a mix of names and places and tables and fields and table occurrences. And so finding the detail of what you want is pretty tricky. So the advantage of us bringing this into FileMaker via the XML is that we've then got this in a database. So if I understand how to use FileMaker, the idea is that you understand how to use BaseElements. So to start with, I've got a solution here. I've got 8 different solutions in this version, including a copy of BaseElements itself. And here is this travel code. Now, this is a really good solution for demonstrating BaseElements. It's a really bad example of what happens when you have a company of 100 staff and they all have full access to do whatever they want in the database. So we were brought in to have a look at this solution and figure out why it was crashing and why it was a disaster. And we sort of pointed out to them, you know, you shouldn't have everyone making changes, and every time they wanted a new trip, they added a new table to the database. So it was really difficult and cumbersome. So for example, here, this counts up everything that's in the solution. There's 88 tables. There's 1,252 table occurrences. We're spread across 72 different files. There's 3,500 layouts, and we can see all of that information here. We can see exactly what's going on. Here's my list of files. Here's how they track different changes over time. So if I wanted to see my list of 88 tables, I can just click on that. Here's my list of 88 tables. If I want to go into any particular one of those, this agents one, for example, I click on that. And this is the agents table, and this is a list of all of the fields in that table. So I can look at any one of these fields then, for example, and look at detail about where those fields are used. So looking at, for example, record number, it tells me the information, the data type, it's a number field, it's normal, it's not global. It doesn't use any other elements, but it's referenced in a whole bunch of 21 other places. So it's used by other fields, objects, relationship steps. So you can see that you can track down through any part of the solution that you want. Getting back though to that idea of why bring this into a FileMaker database is that you can treat this like any other particular database that you've got. I've got 17,000 fields here. Now I can right click in here and do constrain found set. And so there's my 29 from address book, and then I can pop up a new window because I want to play with the found set here, and I can do a find, Command F, put in here text and requests, constrain found set. So they're all the text fields within that address field. So within FileMaker, you know, I can close that window and I've got back to my original found set. So with understanding how FileMaker works, you have a sort of innate understanding of how BaseElements work. The other thing that has this, that's a huge advantage over the HTML DDR is we actually do quite a bit of post-processing. So if you're eagle-eyed, you might have noticed that this BaseElements solution has 99 errors. And you think that if I used BaseElements, I could get rid of all 99 errors. But actually what I'm doing is processing the calculations within BaseElements. So the DDR itself tells you exactly what's going on in the calculation. And if you delete a field, that whole process of understanding what's in that calculation breaks, and the DDR just gives you nothing. So the only way to know what the problem was is actually to parse the text of the calculation itself, looking for specific strings. So you'll often see those unknown or field missing text that appears within the calculation text when you've deleted something that it's used. So unknown is for a custom function, and field missing or table missing is for fields and tables. Depending though as well on top of that which language you're using to generate the DDR, you'll actually get that in different languages. So the reason why this comes up is because we're parsing the text, but I have a calculation to parse the text to pull out those bits of text. So there's a sort of a double whammy. There's no way I can get rid of those errors because I know they're false errors because I'm pulling out the text. But anyway,
It looks like we lost Nick here. I don't know where. I'm going to see if we can get him back.
Great.
Is this? No, it says.
Sorry about this, people. We've got some people connected, and it looks like we just lost Nick. Hopefully, he will be back here in a second. Hey, we're in the 360 Works office in Roswell, and Nick Orr has been presenting. Oh, he might be rejoining here. He's coming back. Okay, so hopefully we'll get him back here in just a second.
I don't know that he knows where this.
Has to be somebody.
So I see Nick has rejoined. Nick, you're muted right now, but it looks like you're coming back here. Well, let's do this here. Nick, I think we can hear you. You there? All right, we can hear you. Well, let's do this here. Yep, we can hear you. Can you hear me? We can hear you. Nick, I think we can hear you. You there? Oh, no, it's echoing back. All right, we can hear you.
No, you can still came back to me.
Hey, Nick. Oops.
no, not quite.
There we go. Got you unmuted.
Unmuted. Excellent.
All right. Sorry about that, everybody. We lost.
Where was it up to?
What was the last thing that you said? Let's get you back presenting here.
Yeah.
They're talking about the errors. And
Oh, so you're talking about errors that you were getting,
not good errors. that they
Or-
track.
errors that you were tracking. Sorry.
Yeah, so base elements, the details of the errors. Yeah. So the point there was just I'm getting feedback. I'm coming back to myself.
Do you have the stream open? Oh, sorry. I'll mute us. Here we go.
Yeah. I'll just keep an eye on that so that it doesn't disconnect. Yeah. So the point was just about us being able to parse parts of the DDR to get even more information than the DDR gives you itself. So we parse out calculations to find errors. We parse out calculations to pull out things like variable references, so we can see which variables you've used in the solution. We pull out other things like function references. So we actually map each particular function that you're using so that we can say, you know, a particular function was introduced in a particular version of FileMaker, and therefore we can tell you your minimum version that your solution needs to run in. We do some neat stuff as well with table occurrences. So we track a table occurrence group to say which particular part of the graph that table occurrence belongs to. So it is technically possible to set up a lookup that goes from one table to another via a relationship, and then to delete the relationship. And the lookup shows you no problems. It just looks like it was work, and even the DER pulls it out that it says, you know, everything's fine, even though the two aren't related. But because we know which group it's in, we can point out that those two aren't related. So the idea of actually processing this DDR and getting all that information becomes really useful. So,
Nick,
Do you mind questions?
no, go for it. Yep.
Okay. Go back to the tables.
Yep.
The numbers on the side, where are you getting those numbers from? How are you group? Where is that grouping coming from? When it says 1, 1, 2, I don't know.
Sorry, which one? This one here?
All right, your second column from, or third column from the right. No, you on the right layout. Go back to the layout you were just Okay, you got notes, and then TOGs. Now, where are you getting the numbers from?
So this column is records, number of records in each table. There's the comment if there's a comment in the table definition.
Mhm.
This is the alert, so whether there's anything wrong with the table. And I'll get to alerts in a sec. This is the number of fields in the table, and this is the number of table occurrences that that table has.
Ah, that's what I was trying to figure out. That was the number of table occurrences.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so as an example, that this starting point screen is my jumping off point from whenever I'm looking at a solution. So if a client came to me and said, here, we've got this FileMaker solution, you've never seen it before, but we need you to do some work on it, I would look at this and say, okay, no worries, what have we got here? We have quite a lot of errors. There's, for example, 2,000 errors across 72,000 steps. It's a big solution. There's 3,500 layouts in this. There's 17,000 fields in this solution. There's a lot of errors. This column is unreferenced. So there's 750 custom functions, but 300, so nearly half the custom functions are unused as well. We've got external data.
What constitutes an error in like an object or an error in a field?
Yep. So in fields here, I can jump straight into these 218 that have errors. And if we have a look at this one, this has got validation and it's using a value list validation, but the value list is missing. So it's anything that's broken. So it is anything that, for example, here's a lookup here and the lookup table occurrence is missing. That one has a table occurrence exists, but the field's missing. Some other interesting ones are calculations. So if we have a look at errors in calculations, so we've got a function missing in there. So it's got issues there with the calculation. So yeah, it's anything that is literally broken. So you create a calculation, have it depend on a field or a custom function, and then you go back and then delete that custom function. And you can do that. In some places, it will warn you if it's externally referenced a value list or externally referenced table from another file. It will just break. So they are things that are problems in the solution. So they're tracked across everywhere. That's potentially a problem in the solution. This is a count of unreferenced items. So, for example, a custom function that is not used anywhere in the solution. But unreferenced is a tricky thing these days because we have the ability to use a lot of what I call indirection. So you can have get field by name, you can have evaluate, or you can have go to layout by calculation. So that has the ability to refer to things that you perhaps never refer to. So the field might be, say, for example, you've got week 1, week 2, week 3, and you're doing a get field by name of week and data that the user entered, so from a dialog, for example. So there's no way of knowing what the user is going to put in the dialog. There's no way of knowing which layout, for example, which field that calculation will refer to at runtime, because it depends on what actually happens when the solution runs. So we have in this, and I'll have a look if we're showing the detail. Yes, so what we actually track in this is this idea of it's unreferenced, but you need to be careful when using it. So we actually go through the solution and work out where you're using indirection. So if you're using, for example, get field, or if you're using go to layout by name, and so this alert about referenced says to you, hang on, it may be used by functions such as get field or evaluate. Generally though, with things that are unreferenced, people know when they're using get field and evaluate and those kind of things, and they don't often refer to specific fields. So you can go through and look at these and go, okay, what can we clean up out of this? I have, for example, 2 tables that I can delete that are unreferenced, not used anywhere, no table occurrences, no other details. So this element is not referenced in this solution and can probably be deleted. So if you're getting a solution that you had been in development for 20 years, you'd be able to go back and say, look, you know, here's a bunch of things that we can go up and delete in our solution and clean it up and get rid of stuff. And that's very much an iterative process. You work through, you delete a script, well, that because the script's no longer being used, well, that script referred to a layout, and now that the script is gone, the layout's no longer being used. So you run it again and you find a different set of unreferenced things. So it's actually a process you run sort of over and over again. So to give you an example of the sorts of things that you do day to day in BaseElements, whenever someone says to me, I'm going to make a change to a particular field, you know, the definition of how a field works, for example. So in agents, for example, we have, where was my example field? Yeah, so this agent type field. So we need to alter, so for example, it's used in a value list somewhere, and we need to see where that's being used. So it's referenced by 4 different objects and a script step. So the script step I can see straight away. That's an import records. It's actually being itself used by a value list, and then I've got these 3 layout objects. So if I change my filter to object, for example, I can then click view and get a list of these. So I can see the file, the layout, it's a field, and what its position is on the layout. So I can tell straight away, I can keep that found set, and I can go through and make that change and make sure that whatever change I made exists in every instance of where that field is being used. Another example I'd like to bring up is someone, I think it was FileMaker 9 that came out with the quick find. So someone asked me, I was doing this presentation at one of the vendor sessions at DevCon, and someone stuck up their hand and said to me, how would I find all of the places I've got unstored calculations on layouts that are enabled for quick find? Because obviously quick find defaults to everything. If I've got unstored calculations on layouts, they're going to be slow. So one of the ways I really like to work in BaseElements is to think of things in terms of hierarchies. So for example, I have 88 tables. Here's my list of tables. And then I have, this one only has a few fields, but I can go and click view for those and I get those 5 fields. I can go back here. What I have in this though is a found set of 88. So I can use this function up here. This is a trigger for changing the way go to related record works. So if you think about go to related record in your head, one of the options in go to related record is to go to related record using found set. So this view button is just a go to related record. So I change it to that, which is now doing go to related record using found set. And when I hit view, it's going to show me all the fields for all 88 tables. So I've now got my 17,000 fields that I have. So within that, I need to know calculated fields. So for example, I can just right click here. Again, you know, FileMaker, I could do sorts, I could chart, I can do whatever I want, but effectively what I want to do is find all the matching fields. So now I have all of the calculated fields, but it's not calculated fields, it's unstored calculations. So we have this option in here, store calculation results true or false. So again, I've got my now list of 7,000. I'm going to do a find, set that to false, and constrain the found set. So I now have 4,000 calculated fields that are unstored. But what I actually need to know is where these are used on layouts. So I can go to my item used here and see there's calculations, there's calculation contexts, and eventually I will find something used on a layout. I'm sure of it. Come on. Oh, sorry, I'm thinking the wrong way. It's referenced by. These items used are the things that this particular field uses. I could have gone right to the start. So referenced by is where this particular thing is referenced. So in this case, it's only used on layout. So there's 4 layout objects. So when I mentioned before about popping up new windows, one of the things that as well is an option here. In that go to related record, you can have that come up in a new window. So that's an option here. So when I click view on this time, but with that option turned on, I pop up that I had go to related record using found set as well. So that's just going to take a sec. So it's doing a go to related record of from the fields to the objects using the found set and putting that in a new window. So across 4,000 fields, that's just going to take a sec, but there you go. So those 4,000 fields are used in 13,000 layout objects, and there's my list. So if I actually wanted to go through and change all of those, I can do that. Showing details. So if I wanted to, for example, look at one of these and see the layout. So for example, I've still got my go to related record using found set, and I've still got my new window option. If I click on the layout button here, so for my 13,000 layouts, 13,000 layout objects, there are 1,100 layouts. So that is every layout that contains a unstored calculation field across that whole solution or subset of solutions. So that thinking in terms of hierarchy is really useful in BaseElements. Be able to look at tables, tables have layouts, tables have fields, fields exist as objects, objects exist on layouts, and layouts are used by scripts. And when you think about your solution in that way, you can think and track through everything that you're trying to do in your solution. So a couple other things here just in terms of this front screen about what BaseElements does. For example, we have some warnings. So warnings are things that aren't broken but aren't necessarily things that you'd like. So for example, relationships is a good example. So in our relationship, we have a field used in one of the joins for this relationship don't have the same type. So you can relate a text field to a number field and vice versa, or text to a date, for example. So if you've got a multi-line key and one of the sides of that is a number, so you'll have a number to text, and that works fine. But in some cases, it will actually give you false results. You can set information into this text side, which is invalid in the number side of the relationship, and it won't work. So it picks up things like that. It's not necessarily broken, but it may cause an issue. So those are the sorts of things you're going to get with warnings. Accounts, for example, you should turn off the option to allow a password change for this account. The account's externally authenticated, password changes are not controlled by FileMaker, and so this option doesn't help. So those are things that FileMaker will let you set things up in this way, but they aren't really useful, or there may be issues. We also track performances. So performance is a relatively new one. As an example, in relationships, we track an issue to say that relationships uses sorting on unstored fields. So relationships that have a complex greater than and less than predicates, for example, can be slow. those kinds of things will come up as performance issues. So there's a few little things there. I'd like to expand that, but it's a tricky thing. A lot of what makes FileMaker performance, pardon me, good or bad, is really around what happens at runtime. So that's the gist of BaseElements. We use it every single day. Any solution that we're trying to make changes to, every time I want to look at what's going on in my files, first thing I do is run BaseElements to see what's there. We don't really run without it. So, any questions about BaseElements?
I appreciate
You're
it.
still in.
Yeah, we're here.
Yep.
We're unmuted here. Anyone have any questions about anything?
No, I appreciate your explaining. I didn't feel I was getting the full benefit.
Yeah, look,
So,
there's lots
thank
to
you.
it. And it just becomes a thing that I think you're better off using it every day, because I come across situations all the time where I go, oh, how am I going to, oh yeah, just run BaseElements, and then, I can figure out that sort of detail. And recognizing as well that it's just a FileMaker solution. If you want to find something, go in and do a find. You want to search in a particular field, for example, Command F, and away you go. So treat it like it's a FileMaker solution that you know and understand, and you'll work well.
I think that was the problem. I wasn't.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No worries. If you've got any other questions, if you've got a little bit more time, I can do a quick demo of Refresh and just talk about the other stuff that we do as well, if you'd like.
Yeah, so I've got a question about this too. Is there a trial version of this or something that we can
Yes.
try it out to play with?
Yep.
There is.
And it's completely unlocked, so there's no restrictions on it, so you can use it for 30 days. So you can do a full analysis and keep that and play with it and treat it like it's a full FileMaker, full application for 30 days.
Okay. Can we get that from Goya.com or the BaseElements?
Yep.
page?
BaseElements.com. Yep.
Okay.
But I'll send you as well. We do a discount at DevCon, so I will send you later today the advance notice of what our discount coupon is going to be for DevCon. So you can also get a bit of a discount on it if you do decide to buy.
All right. Very cool.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you.
Does that apply to upgrades?
Yes,
Just wanted to know.
certainly does. So the other solution that we have is called RefreshFM. So this is a tool for migrating data between two different versions of the solution. So in other words, you've got a development version that you're working on, you've made a lot of changes to, you've got a live version that's up on the client server, and you want to be able to migrate the data from their live version to your empty cloned dev version. So lots of people do this already, set up internal scripting in their FileMaker solution so that they can do this quickly and easily. But this builds you an automatic updater. So it builds that import process for you, and it does it all automatically. So just to demonstrate here, I select my old files. So that's my live there. And I select my new files. So I have my development copy here, and I've got two files. And what I want to be able to do is map all of the tables in there, and I want to figure out which fields are auto enter serials, and I want to know which map the fields. I want them matched by internal matching IDs, so not by name and not by last recently created or whatever it happens to be. I want to be able to delete some fields, and I want to be able to rename others, and I still want the import to work, so it actually matches by internal IDs. And I click setup, put in my account and password for the files, and hit OK. And it's probably hard to tell, but I've taken my hand off the mouse, and everything that it does from this point on, it's doing automatically. So I'm not typing anything, I'm not moving any mouse around, it's doing all the work for me. So it creates scripts, it creates the file references, It looks at it and creates table occurrences. So it has what it calls a control file, so an old and a new control file. So the old obviously points to the old version with all the data in it. The new control file points to the new version with all your empty tables. And it creates table occurrences that point to those external files. So by doing that, we can, within the control file, set up an import script that actually imports between the two. So that way you don't have to make any changes to your solution at all. The import happens in an external file, inside the RefreshFM files, and you don't have to do anything to make that work. So this is running. It's creating layouts now because you need a layout to be able to import into. One more to go. And then the last step's to create a script that does all the work. So it finishes that. And there's my import script. And it's done. So I'll just take back control of the mouse. That's my favorite demo too, being able to, the phrase, I love work, I could watch it all day. So you've set that up, you've got that all going, that's all run. So now you've got your dev version of your file that you take to the client, so you can close refresh, and it contains both itself and all the work that it needs to do and your clone versions. And so you copy this file to your client server, and when they're ready to go, you open it up, you hit copy files. So it's copied the live files to a temp working directory. You click perform import. It runs the import for all of these. It checks that the layout exists, checks that the import worked, it checked that the serial number was set, it counted the number of records that were there before, how many were imported, how many are total in case you're writing over, did the serial number get set properly, and if everything works, that's fantastic. At this point, we haven't touched the original files at all, but what I can do now is hit replace new, and it moves the original files into a backup folder and puts the new ones in its place. So once you set that up in your solution, you can do this import once, twice, or 100 times and know that it behaves exactly the same way every single time. And when you do your next round of development and you add half a dozen tables and you take one away and you rename that and you add fields and you do all the things and all the bits and pieces that you do as part of development, you just go back to your rebuild and you rebuild it, and it rebuilt it from scratch, but you know everything that absolutely worked within your solution. So again, this is a tool we built for ourselves, and it's something that is really handy. It is a huge time saver being able to do updates to client solution files without having any manual intervention at all, and knowing that it just works.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So this is a great tool if you're working on a live file, like you said, versus a development file.
Yep.
And you're going to make changes on your dev one and then take the live one down and do this to quickly get your dev one updated with the current information in there, and then you put your dev one up, and that's your new live file, right?
Exactly. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's RefreshFM. I did have, I don't know where I put it now. I did have a quick little slideshowy thing just to show their other two products, because we have two more products, but they don't demo well. So if you've been following along, so there's BaseElements, developer license is $4.99 and $12.99 for the site license. The discounts 20% and upgrades are $249, so then 20% off those. Refresh $3.99 and $9.99, so similar pricing. And RESTfm. So we wrote, I don't know if you've been following along the FileMaker roadmap. FileMaker is talking about in their next version having a REST API. So we have a product which is some PHP code that is open source, that is a REST API for FileMaker Server. So it's something that they're doing in their next version, and we've been doing for 4 or 5 years now. It's, if you're if you sort of understand REST APIs at all, REST APIs are mostly about how FileMaker can get information from other websites. So your accounting software, you know, Xero Online or QuickBooks Online has an API. It's usually a REST API, and it's a way that FileMaker, for example, can send data to QuickBooks. So you create an invoice in FileMaker and that can be sent to QuickBooks. This is the reverse of that. So this is the ability for your FileMaker solution to have an API that other things can send to. So really handy for you being able to integrate with other solutions. You know, you want to be able to hook some of your product listing stuff onto the web. You go to your web developer and they say, you know, how do we get information out of your FileMaker database? And you tell them they've got a REST API. You've got a REST API, and they just go, excellent, no worries. And you never hear from them again, because the REST stuff is all how the sort of language of the web. So it's understood by web developers. It's all JSON and XML. It's essentially, you know, something that is a widespread language. So we do lots of different integrations with this. We have done things where the callback parts of accounting package or other integrations that we've done get hooked back into FileMaker. So, for example, MailChimp. You can have your mailing list in FileMaker and have that information sent to MailChimp. You can also have MailChimp trigger your FileMaker database when something happens. So, for example, if one of those mailouts causes somebody to click on a link, that can be information that's recorded in MailChimp, but it can also be information that MailChimp sends to you. So you need a REST API for them to be able to send you that information. So those webhooks that MailChimp have come back into FileMaker via RestFM. We use it as well as the basis for a syncing framework that we've written. So we keep our solutions in sync via a whole heap of web service calls. So that's really handy for us. It's open source, so it's just PHP code. No license, no registration, and we have optional annual support contracts. So you can sign up, essentially just helps pay for it, gets you access to support. The other thing it does get you is a copy of our syncing framework. So if you're building syncing into your solution, we wrote this because REST and the HTTP method of working is a lot quicker and shorter than opening a FileMaker file over a network. You can send lots of sort of little bits of information very quickly. So we thought that was a useful situation to do with syncing, so that sponsors get that whole REST API stuff built in and get a copy of that. They can use it on as many solutions as they want. So any questions there about RestFM?
I don't think we've got any questions here. So I guess, or actually, no, I do have a question. How do you think this is going to compare to what FileMaker is proposing for the REST API?
So we have no plans at this point to get rid of what we've done with RestFM, and we're not going to abandon it. We think it's actually useful. The REST API that FileMaker has is JSON only, and it's sort of fairly rigidly structured around what FileMaker want you to do. Because this is PHP, because it's open source, it's a lot more flexible. So the example would be, we did some integration with a company that had FileMaker and some sort of big end other systems, JD Edwards and Siebel and Salesforce and things like that. And so within the company, all of their integration went via a product called Microsoft BizTalk, which is a SOAP XML product. So it acts as sort of a center point for all their intercommunication development. So when they did that, they said, okay, we're going to send you this message, and you want us, and we want you to respond with this message. And there's no ifs, buts, or maybes. So you don't have any control over it. You can't just say, well, look, hang on, here's my REST API and it's JSON and this is the format and the structures and you've got to change you. This is, they're saying they're dictating to us how our messages and our interaction works. So because RESTfm is very flexible in terms of formats, we just created a custom format on the incoming side and a custom format on the outgoing side, and we can make it work. So very flexible in that sense. We do some really neat stuff with being able to authenticate via keys. So you can set up a single, key. We use the UUIDs a lot to be able to do that. And it means that you can then have things like single-use login codes for the REST API, and we use that in terms of delivering a solution. So you send someone an email, it contains a single-use login code, they click on the login code, they get access to the server invalidates that login code and then gives them a permanent one which is different, so then they're hooked in via FileMaker. So all of that stuff, all of the sort of extra works on top there are things that obviously won't be in the REST API. But longer term, I think the PHP stuff is not going to come to the FileMaker Cloud. I don't think they have any plans to do that. And longer term, PHP may be deprecated as part of the product itself as well. So if that happens, then we'd have to just at least look at other options, writing it in JavaScript or something like that. But for now, it's free, it's open source, it's flexible and adaptable. So yeah, really handy. No more questions there?
Anything?
No.
Nope.
So just the last little one I was just going to show you that some of you may or may not be aware of. We have a very confusing product because I couldn't come up with a name for it, and so it became the BaseElements plugin. And so now I spend a lot of time working out what explaining to people what the difference between BaseElements and the BaseElements plugin is. We did have a time there for a brief moment that we were going to come up with a better name for the plugin, and then FileMaker asked about using BaseElements in their examples in the FileMaker training series. So that left a sort of 24-month window where it made sense for it to still be the BaseElements plugin, and by then it sort of has stuck. So this started out as something I wanted for myself again in BaseElements. I wanted to be able to do some XSLT stuff and some file manipulation, and at the same time do what was the other thing? Dialogues. Yeah, this is pre being able to customize dialogues. So I hunted around and tried to find someone who would do that for me, and very few people were willing, and so I ended up finding someone who wrote me a plugin, and it just keeps growing. We keep adding stuff to it. So progress dialogues, clipboard, you can copy files and move files. You can do the file dialogues in a select file. You can set preferences within the preferences folder. There's zips and unzipped. There's encryption and hashing. There's running shells. There's manipulating value lists, like doing sorts or finding uniques. There's XSLT and XPath. There's JSON. There's running SQL. You can call scripts. There's a whole heap of web services stuff. So HTTP GET and all of those related things. There's some zero auth. You can send emails with multiple attachments and HTML and evaluate Java and compress images and all sorts of things. So that runs on Mac and Windows, and also runs in the cloud. And we're working in their roadmap. They've announced an iOS SDK that supports plugins, so we're going to work on that as well. And again, that's another thing that at the time we started, I didn't want to get into the business of selling a plugin. I didn't think what we were doing was worth productizing, so we didn't, and so we made it open source. So it's up on GitHub, same as RESTfm. So it has no licensing and no registration. You don't need to register the plugin. You just download it and use it, and you can use it in all of your solutions across anything you want to do. So the same applies. We have a sponsorship and support option just for individuals and companies, and that gets you access to ask questions, and we help you out with implementation and all sorts of bits and pieces. And we include in that some example code. So we've done integrations with Zendesk and Slack and trying to think of Dropbox and a few others like that. And so we just add those as sample files that come with the individual sponsorship. So that is it. That's the extent of my products.
Well, thank you very much.
Oh, no worries.
It's Patricia Schiffman. I just want to say it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I have to leave now. Have a great year.
Thank you. Hopefully I'll see some of you at DevCon this year.
Well, I'm not going to make DevCon this year, but be thinking about you.
Yeah.
I'm
Well-
sure it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a nice hotel, the Phoenix one. So
Yeah.
Did
I
anyone
remember
else
that one.
have any questions about anything?
Excuse me, guys. I got to run.
Yeah, see ya.
Thank you.
I don't think we have any questions here.
no
So
worries.
yeah, thank you very much for going through all this. This has been great. Yeah,
No
sorry we had earlier. Yep.
I'll shoot you through before the end of today a discount code sometime today. So feel free to share that amongst your wider invitation list for your group.
All right.
Thank you.
I think I'm going to end the stream here. So thank you very much to everyone for watching too.
Thanks,
And
David.